Still working and figuring on the bike here. And we got most of our clearance issues figured out and everything. Now it's getting the jack shaft together and making sure the chain will function up in our area here. So it looks like everything will clear okay, but we need to install a jack shaft down below. Alrighty, well, here's the setup I got in mind. The motor will be placed up in there. Then the chain will run right next to where it used to run before. You can see them wear marks. We can use that as a liner up a little bit. And right here is our main pivot point. So we need the chain to come back on an angle just a bit to clear this. So we'll have a jack shaft right here, mounted to the bottom of this trailing arm. There's a nice little flat area. And then the return chain will come back to the rear sprocket and come on around. Because this is your main power pole. This is where the motor's pulling, and it'll pull here. And then this is just the return. Here's a quick little drawing of what I have in mind as well. The motor will be up here. This is the trailing arm. Got the jack shaft down below. And then the chain will come back just behind the trailing arm, a good ½ inch or 3/4 of an inch. That way we got room for slop. And then this is like an underneath view. Underneath the trailing arm, it's a nice little plate right here that we can mount our 2 jack shafts to. I got these type of pillow blocks for our jack shaft, but they're too wide for this little area we have to work with. Up under here, if you can see that. And to bring them back where the jack shaft would need to be, even if I put a plate out, one of these ears sticks into this little area where we need for tire play. I know we could go back into that a little bit, a ½ inch or so, but rather not if we don't have to. So they have other type of pillow block bearings that are tapped. They have 2 holes underneath here, and they're tapped where they don't have these big flanges or ears sticking off of here. So it's a lot smaller footprint. But you can't find them hardly anywhere. So I ordered a couple of them, but they ain't gonna be in until next week. So that's why I figured we'd work on this setup and everything, lay out what we got going on here. But I think that will work. One of the concerns I have is that this kickstand, once it kicks up, hopefully it doesn't hit or interfere with our jack stand or our lowered chain. If necessary, we'll remove that sumbitch. We got a secondary kickstand. I'd like to keep it. It comes in handy to pop it up for testing purposes and stuff. And also, if we put the pipes back on it, the pipes mount to this bracket here, and they're, let's say, about 3-4 inches wide. And then this pad on the kickstand here bumps up against the bottom of the pipe. So the pipe should be about that wide. The kickstand should stop right in this area. So I'm thinking it should clear our jack stand and chain okay. But we'll find out. Well, while we're waiting on our tapped base pillow block bearings for our jack shaft, I guess the next thing we can address would be the hangover issue. Our motor hangs over this trailing arm bar. Let's see here. About 2.5 inches. which ain't dramatically bad. We still got lots of area to work with. But I don't like it not supported like that. Roughly, that's about how it would be mounted, and that's where our jack shaft will be. So the pillow block will be mounted to the bottom of this trailing arm plate. So I'm thinking, let's see the drawing here. I'm going to try to put our 2 bolts through the motor mount, through the trailing arm, and then thread it into the pillow block. So we'll have two bolts bolting the motor mount through the trailing arm into the pillow block on this side, and then we'll have another pillow block. So we'll have one pillow block about here, and about 3 inches over we'll have the second pillow block. And we still got this hangover here. Going through the scrap metal pile, I have this piece of, looks to be 1/8 inch, maybe a bit more, steel with a nice little bend in the front. And I'm thinking maybe we can cap off the top of this trailing arm here and have the bend coming down, and also have one coming up the bottom with the bend coming up. That way they'll overlap each other a bit. We can put a couple bolts into them. So there'll be like 2 bolts right here. That'll give us more support from the front and make this all one unit. Then we'll have the motor bolted down with 2 bolts on the left, and then 2 bolts in the middle and 2 bolts in the right, basically. The bolts going through the motor mount will also go through this plate, through the trailing arm, through this plate again, and then into the pillow blocks. Kind of complicated, but thinking about it, another option we could try, like I said, we're not using these pillow blocks, so they won't have these flanges on them, but we could mount the pillow blocks to this steel plate. Have the bolts going right through the plate, mounting the pillow blocks in place, and have them flush mount bolts with chamfered holes, so we'll still have a flush surface here. Then we could mount that up to the bottom of the motor plate, and then just attach this right, bolts going through the motor mount, through the trailing arm, into this plate, rather than trying to line up with the pillow blocks. Well, there's a few different ways we can go about it. I think that will give us nice triangulation, I guess you would call it, and some forward support. And this whole little, let's say, imaginary box right here will pivot ever so slightly with the travel of the rear wheel. So we'll have all this area for the other stuff.